Okay, let's talk about Julian Assange and the extradition trial that is taking place in London right now. They are attempting to extradite him to the United States to face possibly 175 years in prison for espionage and hacking. Now, the hacking portion of the charges are new. It's a part of the last 18 charges that have been brought before Julian Assange. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with Julian Assange, he is the founder of Wikileaks. Wikileaks is the organization that received the leaked information from Chelsea Manning that exposed the United States' egregious war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. In this particular, and this is actually the best way to understand why this trial is important. And I have to add, despite my personal feelings about Julian Assange, right? I am not a fan of Julian Assange. And I put that there because I'll show you why later on in the segment. But despite not having an affinity for Julian Assange, what's happening is the U.S. government is trying to break down the wall between a journalist and a leaker, a whistleblower, an informant, their sources. Now, this is the perfect case because we saw with Chelsea Manning. Chelsea Manning leaked the information to WikiLeaks, and she ultimately went to prison for that and served a very difficult time in prison. And it wasn't until President Obama, at the very last year of his presidency, did he commute the remainder of Chelsea's sentence, setting her free. But then when Chelsea did not want to testify against WikiLeaks, the Trump administration put Chelsea back in prison for another year. She was subsequently released because of the trauma that she was going through, and she attempted suicide. But I just want to put it in context because what's happening in London right now is that the United States is trying to successfully argue that there really is no barrier between journalists and our First Amendment right and the leaker. In this case, the whistleblower was Chelsea Manning. She was caught. She faced trial. She went to jail. She did her time and she had her sentence commuted. She was done. That should be the end of the story, but that's not enough for the American government. The American government wants to send a chilling effect to all journalists across the world, no matter where you are. If you publish information that is leaked to you, they want you to go to prison as a journalist, as a publication, for leaking that information, which is clearly a violation of our First Amendment Constitution rights, which is why they added these last 18 charges, which included espionage and hacking. So listen to this clip. This is a clip from Democracy Now! They interviewed Jennifer Robinson, who is his legal counsel there in the UK, in London, and she explains exactly what's going on in this trial. Listen in.
I think is the Department of Justice attempt to try and shift the case away from the Manning disclosures and, of course, the evidence that we've heard this week and seen in the publications around the world, evidence of war crimes, human rights abuse, corruption the world over. It is a clear press freedom case, and the attempts by the Department of Justice to somehow create this as a hacking case when there is absolutely no evidence of any hacking by Mr. Assange, I think demonstrates their desire to move away from the important issues on press freedom. We've heard already in the evidence this case, in the evidence this week from Clive Stafford Smith, the founder of Reprieve, about the importance of WikiLeaks disclosures about US extraordinary rendition, torture, and importantly, drone strikes and extrajudicial killings in Pakistan, and how those disclosures have been essential in his work, both in terms of holding the US government accountable for those actions in Pakistan, but also with respect to his Guantanamo litigation in the United States. We've also heard evidence from Professor Mark Feldstein about the unprecedented nature of the attack on First Amendment that this case represents, and the history of the Espionage Act being threatened against journalists by various presidents, including Roosevelt and Nixon, and now, in this case, by President Trump himself.
And this is why the case is so important, because it is clearly an attempt to shackle journalists and make them afraid of being able to report on information that they receive, however they receive that information. That's the goal of the government. That's the goal of the Trump administration. That's the goal of previous administrations, to be sure. And before I actually no, let me finish, because I was getting ready to give you some things about WikiLeaks that makes me a little frustrated with WikiLeaks. I'm going to save that because I want to make sure that we establish the case that's against the frivolous case that's against Julian Assange, and how it is an attack on journalism in general, and how he is being used as a proxy for all journalists who would challenge the American government. This is a second clip from Jennifer Robinson as she makes it clear that this is exactly what's happening.
Well, Professor Feldstein explained at some length the importance of the First Amendment and how it protects every American citizen and any person within US jurisdiction, their ability to, their free speech. And of course, it protects the media's ability to communicate with sources, receive information and publish it in the public interest. What he pointed out about the danger of this particular case is the breakdown of the distinction between sources and journalists. So we've often seen that sources who make unlawful or unauthorized disclosures are prosecuted and can face criminal prosecution as a result of their disclosures. But historically, that has never been directed at the media. The First Amendment is understood to protect the media in receiving and publishing that information in the public interest, which is exactly what WikiLeaks did. And in this case, what the Trump administration is alleging is that Julian Assange, by virtue of having communications with Chelsea Manning, receiving information from Chelsea Manning and publishing that information, is somehow conspiring and is conspiring in the underlying criminal act. And we've seen this same prosecution strategy now rolled out in Brazil by President Bolsonaro against Glenn Greenwald. That's why this is so dangerous, because this is the kind of activity that journalists engage in all day, every day across the United States and elsewhere around the world, which is why the New York Times and the Washington Post have both, in their editorials, said that this is criminalizing public interest journalism and news gathering practices that have been used for decades.
And this is why, regardless of how anyone feels about Julian Assange, right, as an individual, right, we have to forget about whatever we think about his personal politics, whatever we think about what we think about his political agenda. That's besides the point. We have to set that aside. And I'm not going to lie, it's difficult, and I'll show you why afterwards. But this is important. It is extremely important because he is being used as a proxy for all investigative journalists across the entire globe. Right, because his crimes he didn't commit his crimes in the United States. That's why he is going through an extradition trial right now. So it's journalism across the entire globe. As far as the actual crime, in so much as whistleblowing is a crime, Chelsea Manning served her time and her sentence was commuted by Barack Obama. But that wasn't enough, because they want to make sure, they being the government, wants to make sure that they send a signal to every single investigative journalist publication across the globe that if you publish information that hurts the American government, that exposes its crimes, its war crimes, that they will try you and sentence you to 175 years in prison. This is the clearest assault on free speech that we have seen in a very long time. We're going to take a quick break, and when I come back, this is going to be a long episode, folks. We dug in deep, so we're going to go even longer. It'll probably be a full hour public episode, and we'll just let it be like that. But we'll be back right after this break.